The message arrived at midnight on the station clock, and Ambassador Daniel Porter read it 3 times before he believed what it said. The Galactic Council needed a volunteer. They needed someone to travel into the Crimson Nebula and speak with the Vampire Queen. They needed someone willing to die. Porter set down his coffee and stared at the window. Outside, the stars of Prime glittered against the endless black. He had served as a human diplomat for 12 years now. He had negotiated trade deals with the. He had settled border disputes with the warrior clans of. He had even managed to calm a prince during a diplomatic incident involving spilled ceremonial wine. But this was different. This was sovereign. The intelligence files filled his screen as he scrolled through them. They were an ancient species, pale and cold, who fed on the life essence of living creatures. Their queen had ruled for over 2,000 years. She had personally killed more than 300 diplomatic representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The images showed her throne room decorated with the bones of ambassadors who had displeased her. The reports described how she would drain the life from her victims slowly, savoring their terror as they died. The council had been trying to negotiate with her for 3 standard cycles now. They had closed their borders completely, and their territory sat directly across the main shipping lanes to the outer colonies. Medical supplies could not reach the settlements. People were dying. Children were dying. And every diplomat sent to ask for passage had returned as a corpse if they returned at all. They had sent their most skilled negotiators, had killed them during the opening greetings. They had sent a full delegation with armed guards. She had killed the guards first and made the diplomats watch before she killed them too. They who feared nothing in battle had sent their bravest warrior ambassadors. They had reportedly begged for death before the end. Porter finished his coffee and began packing his travel case. His colleague delegate found him in the morning. He was tall and gray-skinned, with 4 arms that waved in distress as he followed Porter down the corridor. Had worked with humans for many years, but he still did not fully understand them. "You cannot go," said. "This is suicide. This is worse than suicide. Does not simply kill. She destroys. She takes everything you are and leaves nothing behind." Porter continued walking toward the shuttle bay. "Someone has to try." "We have tried. Everyone has tried. She is a monster, Daniel. She enjoys suffering. She has no mercy, no compassion, no desire for peace. She closed her borders because she wants to watch the outer colonies starve. She kills ambassadors because she enjoys the taste of their fear." Porter stopped and turned to face his friend, was trembling slightly, which was unusual for a. They were typically calm and logical, but the mention of the Vampire Queen seemed to shake something deep inside him. "What makes you think she will not kill you in the first minute?" asked. "What makes you different from all the others?" Porter thought about the question. He had been thinking about it all night. They had approached with careful logic and formal proposals. They had offered vast wealth and trade advantages. They had tried to impress her with strength and honor. Every species had brought their own values, their own assumptions about what the Vampire Queen would respond to, and every species had failed. "I do not know if she will kill me," Porter admitted. "She probably will, but I think everyone who came before made the same mistake. They treated her as a problem to be solved. They came with fear in their hearts and offers on their lips. They looked at her and saw a monster." "She is a monster." "Maybe, but she is also a queen who has ruled for 2,000 years. She is a leader who has kept her people alive through catastrophes we cannot imagine. She is ancient and powerful and intelligent, and no one has ever treated her as anything other than a nightmare to be survived." Stared at him. "You think politeness will save you?" "I think no one has ever really listened to her. I think no one has ever asked her what she actually wants instead of begging her for what they want. I think she has been treated like a demon for so long that she has forgotten anyone might treat her differently." "That is a very human way of thinking." "Yes, it is." Porter reached the shuttle bay and paused at the door, was still following him, still waving his 4 arms in agitation. It looked like he wanted to physically restrain his human colleague, but he knew better than to try. Humans were strange about these things. "The council did not order you to go," said. "They asked for volunteers. You can refuse." "I know." "Then why? You have a life here. You have friends. You have a career. Why would you throw all of that away for a mission that will certainly fail?" Porter opened the shuttle bay door and stepped inside. His ship was waiting, small and diplomatic and utterly defenseless. It would carry him across the border into space, where the Vampire Queen waited in her palace of bones. He would either walk out of that palace as the first successful negotiator in the galaxy's history, or he would die screaming while an ancient monster drank his life away. He turned back to one last time. Because those colonists are dying, because children are sick and medicine cannot reach them, because the entire galaxy is paralyzed with fear and someone needs to take the first step. I am not braver than anyone else. I'm just willing to go first. Was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out with one of his upper arms and placed it on Porter's shoulder. It was a human gesture that he had learned over the years. I hope your courage is not wasted, said quietly. I hope you find something in her that no one else has seen, but if you do not, I want you to know that it was an honor to work beside you. Porter smiled. Tell the council I will send a report within 7 days. If they do not hear from me, they should assume I failed. And if you succeed, then I will bring back something better than a report. I will bring back hope. He boarded the shuttle and began the launch sequence. The ship rose smoothly from the bay and turned toward the distant red glow of the Crimson Nebula. Behind him, Prime grew smaller and smaller until it was just another star in the endless night. Ahead, the Vampire Queen waited. She had killed hundreds before him. She had broken warriors and terrified diplomats and crushed every attempt at negotiation. She was the most feared being in the known galaxy. Daniel Porter set his course and flew straight toward her. The border appeared on his scanner as a thin red line, and Daniel Porter crossed it without hesitation. His shuttle was small and slow, designed for diplomacy rather than escape. They would see him coming from a great distance. They would have plenty of time to decide whether to destroy him or capture him. He did not have to wait long. 3 warships emerged from the darkness within minutes. They were beautiful in a terrible way, with black hulls that seemed to drink the light and crimson markings that glowed like fresh blood. Each vessel was easily 10 times the size of his shuttle. Each one carried enough weapons to reduce him to atoms in a single shot. Porter slowed his shuttle and transmitted his diplomatic credentials. Then he sat back in his chair and waited. The response came in the form of a docking clamp. The largest warship extended a metal arm that grabbed his shuttle and pulled it inside. Porter felt his ship shudder as it was drawn into the cargo bay of the vessel. The lights around him flickered from warm yellow to deep red. He was inside their territory now, inside their ship, inside their power. He straightened his diplomatic jacket and walked to the airlock. The commander was waiting for him when the door opened. Lord was tall and pale, with skin like white marble and eyes that shifted between deep red and pure black. He wore armor that looked like it had been carved from shadow, and he moved with the grace of a predator who had never known defeat. Behind him stood 6 soldiers, each one as pale and deadly as their lord. Studied the human for a long moment. His nostrils flared slightly, testing the air. His eyes narrowed as he processed what he was sensing. "You are the ambassador," said. His voice was cold and smooth, like ice sliding over stone. "I am Ambassador Daniel Porter of Earth. I carry greetings from the Galactic Council and a request for audience with Sovereign." Began to circle him slowly. The soldiers watched without moving, their red eyes tracking every breath Porter took. This was a test, Porter knew. Every other species had failed it. They had tried to maintain their calm logic, but their chemical signatures had betrayed their terror. They had trembled. They had reached for weapons they were not carrying. Porter stood still and let complete his circle. "You are not afraid," said. "It was not a question. I am here to negotiate. Everyone who comes here is afraid. I can smell it on them. I can taste it in the air they breathe. Their hearts beat faster. Their bodies produce chemicals that scream of terror, but you," stopped directly in front of Porter and leaned close. "Your heart beats steadily. Your chemicals are calm. You smell of nothing but soap and coffee and something I do not recognize. Determination, perhaps." His eyes flickered. For a moment, something that might have been curiosity passed across his ancient face. "You are either very brave or very stupid." "I have been told I am both." The Lord stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the interior of the ship. "Come, the Sovereign will want to see this for herself. I will grant you passage to Ara." Porter followed, and the soldiers fell into formation around him. They walked through corridors of black metal lit by that same red glow. The ship was vast and quiet, and Porter saw very few crew members as they moved. They passed stopped to stare at him with the same confusion had shown. "You do not run," one of the soldiers said quietly. "You do not scream. Why?" Porter considered the question as they walked. Would running help me? No. Would screaming? No. Then what purpose would either serve? The soldier had no answer. They reached a private chamber where invited him to sit. The furniture was elegant and strange, designed for bodies that did not need comfort the way humans did. Porter sat carefully and accepted the glass of dark liquid that was offered to him. He did not drink it, but he held it politely. The journey to Ara will take 3 days, explained. You will remain here as my guest. Do not wander the ship alone. My crew is curious about you, and curiosity can be dangerous among my people. I understand. Sat across from him and studied him again. Why did the council send a human? Your species is young. You have no history with us. You do not understand what we are. Perhaps that is exactly why they sent me. Explain. Porter set down his glass and met shifting eyes. Every species that has come before brought their fear with them. They knew stories about them. They had seen images of your queen's throne room. They had centuries of hatred and terror built into their cultures. When they looked at you, they saw monsters. We are monsters. Are you? Or is that simply what you have become because everyone expected it? Was silent for a long moment. The red light cast strange shadows across his pale face. You speak dangerously for a prisoner. Am I a prisoner? You are a guest. The difference is merely one of perspective. Porter smiled slightly. Then as your guest, may I ask you a question? Nodded. Why did your people close the borders? The official reports say it was an act of aggression, a display of power. But you have the power to conquer half the galaxy if you wished. Why simply close the borders and wait? The question seemed to strike something inside. His eyes shifted rapidly between red and black, and his hands tightened on the arms of his chair. For a moment, Porter thought he had pushed too far. Then spoke, and his voice was softer than before. That is a question for the sovereign. I am not permitted to answer it. But there is an answer. There is always an answer. The question is whether you will survive long enough to hear it. They traveled through the darkness of space for 3 days, visited Porter each evening, and they spoke of many things. Porter learned about art, which was beautiful and melancholy. He learned about their music, which used frequencies that human ears could barely detect. He learned about their history, which stretched back further than most civilizations in the galaxy. And slowly, carefully, he learned that they were not simply monsters. They were a people who had been forced to become something terrible to survive. They had been dying, long ago, and evolution had given them a dark gift. They fed on life because they had no other choice, and the galaxy had hated them for it ever since. On the 3rd day, the of Ara appeared in the viewport. It was a dark planet orbiting a dying red star, and its cities glowed with crimson light against the shadowed surface. It was beautiful and terrifying, and Porter felt his heart beat a little faster for the first time. She is waiting for you, said quietly. She has never waited for anyone before. You have made her curious. Is that good? I do not know. No one has ever made her curious before. Porter took a deep breath and prepared himself for the audience that would decide his fate. Somewhere below, in a palace decorated with the bones of failed diplomats, the vampire queen waited to meet the strange human who did not know how to be afraid. The palace of Sovereign rose from the dark stone of Ara like a blade pointed at the sky. Its towers were sharp and elegant, and its walls were carved with images that told the story of a civilization older than most stars. Daniel Porter walked through the main gate with Lord beside him, and he felt the weight of 2,000 years pressing down on his shoulders. The entrance corridor was designed to break the spirit of anyone who walked through it. Bones lined the walls on both sides, arranged with careful artistry. Some were large and curved, belonging to species Porter did not recognize. Others were smaller and more familiar. He saw skulls that could have belonged to, and countless other remains that represented the failed ambassadors of galactic history. Porter walked past them without stopping. The guards at the end of the corridor watched him approach with something like surprise in their red eyes. They had seen hundreds of visitors enter this hall. All of them had slowed. All of them had trembled. Many had tried to turn back. But the human walked steadily forward, his eyes fixed on the great doors ahead. The doors opened, and Porter entered the throne room of the vampire queen. The chamber was vast and dark, lit only by that eternal red glow that seemed to follow the everywhere. The ceiling disappeared into shadow far above. The floor was polished black stone that reflected the dim light like still water, and at the far end of the room, on a throne carved from something that might have been obsidian, sat Sovereign. She was ancient and beautiful in a way that made Porter's breath catch in his throat. Her skin was pale as moonlight, and her hair was silver-white and long, flowing down around her shoulders like liquid metal. Her eyes were the color of dying stars, red and gold, and flickering with an inner fire that had burned for. She wore robes of deep crimson that seemed to move on their own, and her fingers ended in nails that were sharp and black. The entire court stood frozen as Porter walked toward the throne. Nobles and warriors and servants all watched the human approach their queen. None of them breathed. None of them moved. They were waiting for the moment when would rise and destroy this foolish creature who dared enter her presence. Porter stopped at the appropriate diplomatic distance and bowed formally. Sovereign, I am Ambassador Daniel Porter of Earth. I bring greetings from the Galactic Council and a request for negotiation. Did not respond immediately. She studied him from her throne, her ancient eyes taking in every detail of his form. Then slowly she rose. The court shifted nervously. When the sovereign rose from her throne, it usually meant death was coming. Descended the steps toward Porter with the grace of a predator. She moved without sound, her robes trailing behind her like blood flowing across stone. She circled him once, twice, 3 times, coming closer with each pass. When she spoke, her voice was like honey and ice, sweet and cold at the same time. I have killed 317 ambassadors in this room, she said. I have drained the life from negotiators while they begged for mercy. I have made warriors weep like children before the end. I have tasted the fear of every species in the galaxy. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the subtle patterns in her ancient eyes. But I cannot taste yours. You do not fear me. I respect you, Porter said. Fear and respect are not the same thing. Tilted her head slightly. It was a strangely human gesture, and it looked odd on her ancient face. Respect, that is an interesting word. No one has used it in my presence for a very long time. That seems like a failure on their part. A murmur ran through the court. Several nobles exchanged glances. No one spoke to the sovereign this way. No one treated her as an equal. No one stood before her without trembling. Smiled, and her teeth were very white and very sharp. You are either the bravest creature I have ever met or the most foolish. I have not decided which. I have been told I am both. Lord said the same thing. Began circling him again, slower this time. He also told me that you asked questions during your journey here. You asked about our history, our culture, our art. You wanted to understand us rather than simply survive us. Understanding seemed more useful than panic. And yet understanding has never saved anyone before. Knowledge of what we are has only made the fear stronger. The more they learned, the more they trembled. Porter nodded. But they learned the wrong things. They learned about your power, your kills, your centuries of violence. They did not learn about your poetry or your music or the beauty of your architecture. They saw only the monster and never looked for the civilization behind it. Stopped her circling. For a long moment she simply stared at him. The court held its breath. Why are you here? She asked finally. What do you want from me? I want to ask you a question. A question? Yes. Laughed, and the sound was strange and ancient, like bells ringing in an empty temple. 317 ambassadors came before you. They brought demands and offers and threats and bribes. They begged for passage through my territory. They pleaded for trade agreements. They tried to convince me that cooperation would benefit my people, and you come here with a question. I do. Then ask it. Porter took a breath and spoke the words that no one else had ever thought to say. What do you want, Sovereign? Not what does the galaxy want from you. Not what can you give in exchange for something else. What do you, personally, actually want? The silence that followed was absolute. Every in the room stood frozen. Herself seemed to stop moving entirely, as if the question had physically struck her. No one has ever asked me that, she said quietly. In 2,000 years of rule, no one has ever asked what I want. Then perhaps it is time someone did. Looked at him with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. She looked at him like he was something new, something unexpected, something that did not fit into her ancient understanding of the universe. Sit with me, she said finally. I think we have much to discuss. She turned and walked back toward her throne, but instead of ascending the steps, she gestured to a smaller chair nearby. It was the chair reserved for honored guests, and according to Lord, no one had sat in it for over 800 years. Porter walked forward and sat down. The court watched in stunned silence as their ancient queen settled into her throne and began, for the first time in centuries, to actually talk with an ambassador rather than simply killing one. "You asked what I want," said. "The answer is complicated. It requires that you understand things about my people that no outsider has ever learned. It requires trust that no outsider has ever earned. I am willing to listen for as long as you are willing to speak." Studied him again, and something shifted in her ancient eyes. It might have been curiosity. It might have been hope. It might have been something that had not stirred in her heart for a very long time. "Then I will tell you the truth," she said. "I will tell you why we closed our borders. I will tell you what my people truly need. And then you will understand why every ambassador before you had to die." Porter leaned forward slightly. "I am ready." And for the first time in 2,000 years, Sovereign began to share the secrets of her dying civilization with someone from beyond the Crimson Nebula. The truth, when it came, was not what Daniel Porter had expected. Spoke for hours in that dim red throne room, and her voice carried the weight of. She told him about the ancient plague that had nearly destroyed her people, about the desperate evolution that had saved them but also cursed them. She told him about the centuries of hatred that followed, about the wars fought against species who saw them only as monsters to be destroyed. She told him about the slow decline that had begun 3 generations ago, when the feeding mechanism that kept them alive started to fail. "We are dying," said simply. "Our bodies are breaking down. Each generation is weaker than the last. Our children do not live as long as their parents. Our elders fade faster than they should. The very thing that saved us is now killing us, and we do not know how to stop it." Porter listened without interrupting. The court had slowly emptied during the Queen's confession, until only Lord and a few trusted nobles remained. Even they looked uncomfortable hearing their sovereign speak so openly about their weakness. "We closed the borders because we could not afford to appear weak," continued. "The galaxy has hated us for 2,000 years. If they learned that we were vulnerable, that we could finally be destroyed, they would come for us with everything they have. All the species we have fought and frightened over the centuries, they would unite against us. We would be wiped from existence within a single generation." So the border closure was defense, not aggression. "Yes, and every ambassador who came here, I killed them because they would have reported our weakness back to the council. Their deaths bought us time. Their fear maintained the illusion of strength." Porter nodded slowly. He understood now. The monster that terrified the galaxy was not a predator hunting for pleasure. She was a queen desperately trying to protect her dying people from enemies who would show no mercy. "The council does not want to destroy you," Porter said carefully. "They want passage through your territory. Medical supplies cannot reach the outer colonies." Waved a pale hand dismissively. "The council may not want our destruction, but they cannot control all their member species. They have sworn blood oaths against us. They consider us an evolutionary mistake that should have been corrected centuries ago. If word spread that we were weak, the council would not be able to stop the war that followed. What if someone could help you? What if there was a way to fix the feeding mechanism, to cure your people, to give you back your strength?" The Queen looked at him with those ancient, flickering eyes. "We have tried everything. Our scientists have worked for generations. Nothing works. Our biology is too complex, too strange. We evolved in ways that no other species understands." "Humanity might understand." Laughed, but there was no mockery in the sound. "Humanity is young. Your species has barely explored beyond your own solar system. What could you possibly know about biology?" "Nothing yet, but that is exactly why we might be useful." Porter leaned forward in his chair. He had been thinking about this since first hinted at the truth during their journey. He had been turning the problem over in his mind, looking for an angle that no one else had tried. "Every species that has studied you has come with assumptions," he said. "They looked at your feeding mechanism and saw something horrifying, something wrong, something that needed to be feared rather than understood. They never really studied you as a scientific puzzle because they were too busy being afraid. But humans have no history with the. We have no cultural terror, no ancient grudges, no evolutionary instinct to fear you. We would come to your biology with fresh eyes." Was silent for a long moment. Lord shifted nervously near the wall. "You are suggesting an exchange," the Queen said finally. "Human scientists study our condition, and in return we open the shipping lanes." "I am suggesting more than that. I am suggesting a partnership." "Partnership?" spoke the word like she was tasting something unfamiliar. That is not a word anyone has ever used with my people. There is always a first time. The queen rose from her throne and walked to a great window that looked out over the dark city below. The red light of the dying star cast long shadows across her ancient face. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than before. Why would humanity help us? Your species has nothing to gain from our survival. The galaxy would be simpler without us. Safer, less frightening. Porter stood and walked to stand beside her. It was a bold move, approaching the vampire queen uninvited, but she did not stop him. Humanity has a strange relationship with monsters, he said. In our history, we have been the monsters more than once. We have feared the different, the strange, the unknown. We have destroyed what we did not understand. And we have learned, slowly and painfully, that the things we call monsters are usually just creatures we have not bothered to understand. Pretty words. True words. We have also learned that the universe is vast and cold and indifferent, and that survival depends on connection rather than isolation. You have been alone for 2,000 years, Sovereign. You have been hated and feared and hunted. Perhaps it is time to try something different. Turned to look at him directly. She was taller than him, and her eyes burned with ancient fire, and her beauty was terrible enough to break weaker hearts. But Porter met her gaze without flinching. "You are not afraid of me," she said again, as if she still could not quite believe it. "I am terrified of you," Porter admitted. "My heart has been beating faster since I entered this room. My hands want to shake. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to run. But fear is not the same as surrender. Humans learned a long time ago to be afraid and keep moving anyway." Studied him for a long, silent moment. Then, slowly, something shifted in her expression. It might have been respect. It might have been the beginning of trust. It might have been hope awakening after centuries of dormancy. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. Porter took a deep breath. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Human medical teams come to Ara to study your condition. They work alongside your scientists, sharing knowledge and techniques. In exchange, you open the shipping lanes to medical supply vessels. Nothing military, nothing threatening, just medicine for dying colonists. That is not enough for your council. It is a start. If the medical research succeeds, if we find a treatment or a cure, then we can discuss broader agreements. Trade, cultural exchange, perhaps even alliance. Laughed again, and this time there was genuine amusement in the sound. Alliance. The vampire queen allied with humanity. The galaxy would think we had both gone mad. The galaxy already thinks we are mad. You for closing your borders, us for sending an ambassador into your throne room. Perhaps madness is exactly what this situation needs. The queen was silent for a long time, staring out at her dying world. Porter waited beside her, watching the red light play across the ancient city. He did not push. He did not plead. He had made his offer, and now the decision rested with her. Finally spoke, "I will need to consult with my advisors. This is not a decision I can make alone." "I understand. You will remain here as my guest while we deliberate. It may take several days." "I am in no hurry." Turned to face him fully, and for the first time, Porter saw something almost warm in her ancient eyes. "You are a strange creature, Daniel Porter of Earth. You walked into my throne room expecting to die, and instead you have offered me something no one has offered in 2,000 years. "What is that?" "Hope," said the vampire queen. "You have offered me hope." She gestured to Lord, who stepped forward immediately. "Show the ambassador to the guest quarters, the real ones, not the cells, and see that he is treated with respect." Bowed deeply, "Yes, Sovereign." As Porter followed the Lord out of the throne room, he felt the weight of what had just happened settling into his bones. He had not been killed. He had not even been threatened. Instead, the most feared ruler in the galaxy had listened to him, truly listened, and was considering his words. It was not victory yet, but it was the beginning of something that might become victory. And somewhere in the outer colonies, sick children were still waiting for the medicine that might finally be able to reach them. 3 weeks passed in the palace of the Vampire Queen, and Daniel Porter spent them learning everything he could about the. He walked through their great library with Sovereign herself, studying texts written in languages that had been dead before humanity learned to make fire. He listened to their music, strange haunting melodies that used frequencies just beyond normal human hearing. He watched their artists create works of terrible beauty, sculptures carved from shadow and paintings made with pigments that seemed to glow with inner light. And slowly, carefully, the negotiations took shape. The council was suspicious at first. They had survived for two by trusting no one, and the idea of inviting outsiders into their territory felt like madness, but spoke on Porter's behalf, and her word carried weight that nothing else could match. She told them about the human who walked into her throne room without fear, who asked questions instead of making demands, who offered partnership instead of ultimatums. "He sees us as people," she said during one council session that Porter was allowed to observe. "Not as monsters, not as enemies, not as problems to be solved. He sees us as a civilization worth saving." One of the elder nobles, a pale woman named Lady, spoke the doubt that many felt. "And if this is a trick, if the humans are simply trying to learn our weaknesses before they attack, then we will be no worse off than we are now," replied. "We are dying regardless. At least this way, we die having tried something different." The agreement was finalized on the 20th day. Human medical teams would be permitted to travel to Ara, escorted by vessels for safety. They would work alongside scientists in specially prepared facilities. In exchange, the shipping lanes would open to medical supply vessels, with strict protocols to ensure no military ships entered space. It was a small agreement by galactic standards, a limited exchange, a cautious first step, but it was more than anyone had achieved in 2,000 years. Porter sent his report to the council through a secure channel provided by Lord. The response came back within hours, filled with disbelief and celebration, and 1,000 questions about how he had managed the impossible. He did not answer most of the questions. Some things were too complicated to explain in a report. On the 21st day, summoned him to her private chambers. It was a great honor, he knew. No outsider had ever been invited into the Queen's personal space. The room was simpler than he expected, decorated with old books and strange instruments and a single window that looked out at the stars. "You will be leaving soon," said. She stood by the window, her silver hair catching the dim red light. "The council wants me to present the agreement formally. They still do not entirely believe what happened." "Neither do I some days." Porter smiled slightly. "You could come with me, present the agreement yourself, show the galaxy that they are not simply monsters behind closed borders." Turn to face him. "You want me to travel to Prime, to stand before the council that has feared me for. I want you to show them what I saw, a queen who loves her people, a civilization worth knowing, a partner instead of a threat." "They will be terrified." "Yes, but terror can become respect given time. You taught me that." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she laughed, and the sound was different now, warmer, more human. "You are a very strange ambassador, Daniel Porter. You walked into my throne room expecting death, offered me hope, and now you want me to walk into the council chamber that has plotted my destruction for centuries. I want you to give them the same chance you gave me, the chance to see you clearly." Considered this. Her ancient eyes flickered between red and gold, and Porter could see her weighing the risks against the possibilities. Finally, she nodded. "Very well, I will accompany you to Prime. It has been 800 years since a sovereign left our territory. Perhaps it is time." The journey back was different from the journey in. Porter's small shuttle was replaced by the Queen's personal vessel, a great ship of black and crimson that carried them through the stars like a shadow given form. Spent most of the trip asking questions about humanity, about Earth, about the strange species that had produced an ambassador who did not know how to be afraid. Porter answered everything honestly, even the parts that made humanity look foolish or cruel or weak, seemed to appreciate the honesty. "Your species has done terrible things," she observed after he told her about some of Earth's darker history. "Yes, we have also done wonderful things. We contain both possibilities just like everyone else. Including especially The arrival at Prime caused immediate panic. The Council Station's defense systems activated the moment ship was detected. Emergency protocols were initiated. Evacuation orders were prepared. Every species on the station believed that the Vampire Queen had finally decided to attack. Then Porter's voice came through the communications channel, calm and reassuring, explaining that the Sovereign had come in peace to formalize their agreement. The panic did not entirely subside, but the weapons were lowered. The council chamber was full when entered. Every delegate from every species sat in their assigned places, and every one of them watched the vampire queen with expressions that ranged from terror to fascination. She walked with the grace of 2,000 years, her robes flowing behind her like liquid shadow, and she took her place at the presentation platform without hesitation. Porter stood beside her. He had refused to let her enter alone. "I am sovereign of this," she said, and her voice filled the chamber without effort. "I have ruled my people for two. I have killed many who stood against us. I have done things that haunt your nightmares, and I have come here today to ask for your help." The delegates shifted nervously. This was not what they had expected. Explained everything: the dying condition, the closed borders, the desperate theater of killing ambassadors to maintain an illusion of strength. She laid bare the secrets of her civilization to a chamber full of beings who had every reason to destroy her. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Then Delegate stood. The looked older than the last time Porter had seen him, worn down by weeks of worry over his human colleague. "Ambassador Porter," said carefully, "is what the sovereign says true?" Porter nodded. "Every word. I have seen their records, spoken with their scientists, spent 3 weeks learning their culture. They are not our enemies. They are a civilization in crisis that needs our help. And in exchange for this help, they will open the shipping lanes. They have already agreed. Medical supplies can begin moving within days." Another silence fell. Then slowly other delegates began to speak. Questions were asked. Answers were given. The initial terror began to give way to something else, something that looked almost like hope. It took hours, but the agreement was formalized before the session ended. Human medical teams would depart for Ara within the week. The shipping lanes would open immediately. And for the first time in galactic history, they had allies instead of enemies. Afterward found Porter standing alone by a viewport, watching the stars. "You did an impossible thing," she said quietly. "You walked into the monster's lair and walked out with peace." Porter shook his head. "I did not do anything impossible. I just treated you like a person. That should not be remarkable." "And yet it was. In 2,000 years, you are the only one who thought to try." She placed a pale hand on his shoulder and Porter felt the cold strength in her fingers. But there was no threat in the touch, only gratitude. "My people will remember this," said. "They will remember the human who was not afraid. They will tell stories about you for generations." "I was afraid," Porter admitted. "Every moment, I just did not let it stop me." Smiled, and for the first time the expression looked almost warm. "That is what courage is, Daniel Porter. Fear and forward motion combined. Your species understands something that took mine too to learn." "What is that?" "That monsters are only monsters until someone is brave enough to see them clearly." She released his shoulder and turned to walk away. At the door, she paused and looked back. "The medical teams will find a treatment," she said. "I am certain of it. Your scientists will see our biology with fresh eyes, as you said. They will solve what we could not." "And if they do not?" Ancient eyes flickered with something that might have been hope, or might have been faith, or might have been simply the trust of someone who had finally found a friend after 2,000 years alone. "Then we will have died trying something new, and that will be enough." She left and Porter stood alone with the stars. In the outer colonies, medical ships were already preparing to launch. On Ara, scientists were clearing laboratory space for human visitors. Across the galaxy, beings who had feared the vampire queen for centuries were beginning to wonder if they had been wrong about her all along. And in the council chamber, delegates were already talking about what other impossible problems might be solved if someone was brave enough to ask the right questions. It was not the end of the story. It was barely the beginning, but beginnings were enough. Daniel Porter of Earth had walked into the throne room of the most feared being in the galaxy, and walked out with the most unlikely friendship in galactic history. "That would do for now,"